My friend Rick was on my cross-country team in high school with me, and during our cross-country races, he loved running his hardest on the hills and small mountains in our races. He would run at about 60% for most of our races, but once he got to a hill, he would run at about 110% because he wanted to pass the other runners on the way up the hill. You see, it was always on the hills that our parents and our friends and our classmates and all the other people who were watching the races, they would always camp out on the side of the hill and cheer on the people who were going up the mountain. So he thought, if I pass people on my way up the mountain, I can take all the glory of the hillside for myself. And he did. He took the other runners' glory. He didn't think that it's how everyone should run. He thought it's only how he should run. 60% for most of the race, but 110% on the hills and mountains, because he wanted all of the glory of the hills and mountains. Maybe you know that moment. That moment when you get the respect that you've been waiting for. Everyone's cheering you on and glad to see you doing well. Or maybe you don't know what that moment feels like. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to give you respect, for someone to notice when you do well. Or maybe you've just been waiting for someone to notice that things have not been going well for you lately. That would be someone else showing you respect, just to notice you. You see, in life, the respect that we receive usually does not match what we need. And that can really knock the remaining wind out of your sails. It can knock you down when you're trying to pick yourself up. It can make you wonder, who values me? On the mountain of transfiguration, God the Father is going to show how much he values God the Son. Jesus is going to get a lot of respect from God the Father as I read it in just a moment. And Jesus deserved all that respect, didn't he? He deserved all the glory in the whole world. For those who have felt devalued, for those who feel like they're not getting the respect that they deserve, for those who feel at times like the world's turned their backs on them, Jesus will show us what it means to be truly valued by God. From Mathew 17. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The word of the Lord. When the first Lord of the Rings movie came out in 2001, I thought it was the best movie ever. I thought it was the most glorious thing in the cinema that anyone could have ever produced. And that's why I was confused when it came time for the Oscars that year. And yes, the first Lord of the Rings movie was nominated for some awards, but it didn't really win any, or at least not the important ones. It was nominated for Best Picture, and Peter Jackson was nominated for Best Director, but neither of those awards went to Lord of the Rings. I was a little confused. Then the next year, the second movie came out. And it was also amazing. But again, it did not win Best Picture or Best Director, even though it was nominated for those awards. Well, it wasn't until the next year that it became clear what the people who vote for the Oscars were doing. They were waiting to give all the glory and respect that the whole trilogy deserved. They were waiting to give it to the third movie. It was nominated for 11 awards, and it won every single award it was nominated for. A clean sweep of the Oscars. It took a while, but eventually, the Lord of the Rings movies, they got a good gob of glory. I think that's why Peter was excited on the mountain of transfiguration. He was seeing Jesus finally getting the respect that he deserved. And so, excited but confused, he offered to put up 3 shelters for Jesus and for Moses and Elijah. You see, he just wanted to stay there, camped on the top of that mountain, because Jesus was finally getting respect. Oh, how it must have grated on Peter's soul to see Jesus be disrespected for 3 years, to see the religious leaders putting him down and saying that he was a blasphemer. See, Peter knew what it was like to have to wait for respect, because he had to wait to see Jesus get respect. And he knew it for himself too. No one was really cheering him on except Jesus when he gave up his fishing business and went away from his family to follow Jesus. And in the years that would follow, he and the other disciples would be persecuted simply for believing and confessing faith in Jesus. Peter knew what it was like to have to wait for respect. That's why Peter was excited, though, because Jesus finally was getting all that respect. Jesus' face shone like the sun. When you were younger, and little ones, maybe you've been hearing your parents say to you, don't look right at the light of the sun. Don't look right at the sun, because it's going to hurt your eyes. It's so bright. That's how brightly Jesus' face was shining. And his clothes couldn't contain his heavenly glory that was on display that day. His clothes were also radiating that brilliant light. God the Father had this amazing light show to display his son, Jesus. But I think that even more important than that light show was the guests that God the Father brought to that mountain with Jesus. Moses and Elijah, 2 believers who had already been brought to heaven, were on the mountain with Jesus. These Old Testament figures were conversing with Christ. So why Moses and Elijah? Well, maybe you recall that Elijah is one of the 2 people in the Bible, along with Enoch, who didn't die. He was taken directly from life on earth to life in heaven. And Moses, too, he didn't suffer a death like we suffer. You see, when someone dies in our lives, we usually have a funeral and a burial. But there was no one to bury Moses. No, in the Bible it tells us that God buried Moses. And so Moses and Elijah were 2 people who were not subject to the same kind of death that we are subject to. Did you get what God the Father was saying by bringing Moses and Elijah there? He was saying, my son, Jesus, he also does not deserve to be subject to death because he's never done anything wrong by my law. He is perfect. He's pointing a big finger at Jesus and saying, look, my deathless son, to him be the glory. Peter was beyond himself. He was loving this. He wanted the party to keep on rocking because he knew what it was like to have to wait for that kind of respect. The respect that finally Jesus was getting. That Peter had been waiting 3 years for someone to finally show that Jesus is amazing. That Jesus, you're the best. From whom have you been waiting for respect? Who in your life is someone that you've been waiting to give you respect? Maybe it's a husband who doesn't realize how much you're actually doing for your family. Maybe it's a parent who doesn't seem to care about the things that you care about and that you're trying to excel at. Maybe it's a friend who always has to tell a better story or a funnier joke than you do. Maybe it's a wife who, after you have been at work for so many hours, waiting for someone to show you respect, and all they've been doing is telling you what to do, you get home and then she tells you what to do. Maybe it's the job, the company, that says that you're not qualified for the position that you applied for. Maybe it's the school that says, yeah, you're not really good at taking tests, so you can't come in. We're all waiting for respect from someone. Jesus was getting boatloads of respect there on the mountain because God the Father was shining the glory of God through Jesus. And Moses and Elijah were there giving glory to Jesus. Peter, James, and John, in their own fearful way, they were giving glory to Jesus too. They were all there on that mountain. What an amazing event. But do you realize that someone else was there too? Someone was there talking to Peter, telling him how to interpret this event. It's the tempter. And he was trying to get Peter to see in the respect and glory that Jesus was receiving, the respect and glory that Peter felt he himself deserved. Because that's what Satan does. He comes to us and he says, you deserve all the glory of the whole world. Satan's been training us to do it too. So that when we feel disrespected at work, we lash out with our words and our actions. Or when someone in our family or our circle of friends isn't giving us respect, we let it boil up inside of us. We get bitter, and then we get angry. Because we like to think that all of the glory should be for us. Satan's been training us to think this, that more and more I should be getting all the glory of the whole world, and we become obsessed with it. That's Satan's plan. Do you know why he does it? Why he wants your soul like that? Is it because he respects you? No. It's because Satan hates God that much. He hates God so much that he wants you to make yourself into a little god for yourself by demanding the respect of the whole world for yourself. Dan Merchek is a sheriff's deputy in Lake County, Indiana. That's where Gary, Indiana is. He's a deputy sheriff there. And one day, as Deputy Dan was driving around on patrol in Lake County, a call came over the radio that there was a vehicle on fire in another town. Well, Deputy Dan, he turned on his siren and he rushed to the scene of the incident. And when he got there, he saw the car on fire, and the two people who had been in the vehicle were outside the vehicle, basically unharmed. But there was still someone in there, or should I say, something. There was still a dog in the car, in the back seat, trying to crouch down and get away from the flames. So what did Dan do? He rushed in. There was a vehicle on fire with a dog inside, and he didn't want to see the dog die. So he went to save it. With extra strength that he mustered somehow, he pried the back door open, even though it had been locked. He fought against the flames. He put most of his body into the vehicle. He scooped up the dog and got it out of there. With all the flames that were around him, the people who witnessed this said that it was an amazing rescue. It's the sort of event that we would want to hear about more and more, but not the sort of event that we'd want to be a part of. You wouldn't want to be Deputy Dan, called upon to do that. Actually, it makes us think, would we even want to save a dog? Would you risk your own life just to save a dog? I think that's the same question that Satan was tempting Jesus with. Are you really going to go through with it, Jesus? Are you really going to put your own life at risk for them? For Peter? For James and John? For the people of Christ Lutheran? For Garrett? Because they've been listening to my training program, where I try to get them to make themselves little gods in their own hearts. They've been listening pretty well. I got a pretty effective program. Are you sure you want to put your own life at risk for them? But that's why Jesus came down the mountain. That's why Jesus let Moses and Elijah go back up to heaven. That's why Jesus went to another mountain, the mountain of the cross. Because he was devaluing his own life because he values yours that much. He was willing to go through the cross and that hellish torment because he wanted you to see how important you are to him. He was giving you a greeting card that said, "You're the best. You're what I want. I want you in heaven." That's how much respect Jesus has for your soul. That changes everything. Let me submit 2 ways that this changes your life on the day-to-day. First off, you don't need to collect glory and try to gain all the respect of the whole world. In fact, when someone gives you a compliment, with your own personality and situation, I want you in some way to reply with, "All glory to Jesus." Because you don't need to collect the glory. You get to lavish it on Jesus because you already have God's respect. And the second way that this affects your life is the next time that you see someone who is angry or depressed, underneath the anger and the depression is probably some element of feeling disrespected. I want you to share with them the thought, Jesus values you. Not I value you. That's nice and all. But let them know that Jesus values them. And tell them how you know. Because he came down from the mountain where he was receiving all that glory. Because he values you that much to go to Mount Calvary. And that's how you can give all credit to